the AI models are not going to be experts in your government. You are going to be expert in your government. You're going to be familiar more with the policy environment, with the local codes, and the considerations that would go into what you would want to put into that policy.
What's really happening with AI in local government? Employees are experimenting with it every day. The potential is huge, but there are also concerns. I'm Angelica Wedell, and this is Innovate by ICMA. And in this exclusive interview with Gerald Young from MissionSquare Research Institute, we'll break down results from the latest survey study on how AI is actually being used in public sector workplaces and what leaders need to do next. Today, y'all, we are talking about a topic that is impacting the work world for all of us: AI. And for state and local government specifically, what are the most common uses of AI? What are the biggest concerns? There's actual data and research on AI in local government now. MissionSquare Research Institute recently released a study called Artificial Intelligence in the Workforce, a survey of state and local employees. And I could not be more pleased to welcome Gerald Young, MissionSquare Senior Researcher, to the conversation. Hi, Gerald.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, we're going to jump into this interview in just a moment, but first, let me tell you a little bit about Gerald. Gerald conducts quantitative and case study research on state and local government recruitment and retention, impacts of employee student debt, workforce diversity, equity, and inclusion, public retirement plans, financial wellness, staff sharing, and motivations for new generations to pursue careers in public service. Prior to joining the Research Institute in 2017, he worked with ICMA for over 2 decades on performance management, police recruitment, researching smart communities and local government innovation, and a whole lot more. And he's also served in local government directly himself for 8 years with the cities of Chula Vista and Loma Linda in California, with a focus on budgeting and program evaluation. His research has been covered all over the place by a variety of publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Federal News Network, Pensions and Investments, Plan Sponsor, Political, Axios, Bloomberg, Route 50, American City and County. I mean, did I miss any?
ICMA.
ICMA, exactly. And he's presented at in-person and online events for dozens of professional organizations in the public sector space. And he also earned a master's degree in public administration from the University of Kansas. So we are so excited. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I can't wait to learn more about this data, your research, and your thoughts on that today, Gerald. Is there anything else that you would like to share about yourself or MissionSquare before we officially begin?
No, let's get into it.
All right, perfect. All right, y'all. The first question is, why are local government employees using AI in the first place, and what are they using it for?
Well, it's a good question, and it's one that's not so much, I would say, driven by the use cases as by whether there is direction to do so or not. And that's one of the interesting questions that we found. About a third said that their employers were telling them that they needed to use it. And, obviously there is a desire to be cutting edge to a certain extent. But more than half were saying that it was their team's own preference. And that decentralized, that, kind of non-directed aspect of it is something that has come up a couple of different ways in the research that we've done. But overall, it works out to be about a third in terms of how people are using it. About a third are using it for some kind of a customized application, something that was done just for their government. About another 20 some percent were doing it for, let's say, something that another government or an association or regional group might have developed. And then the rest are using it simply in off-the-shelf commercial applications. So not something that was designed for their government, but maybe something that happens to reside in an app that they are familiar with outside of work, and they are just starting to use those tools, whether it's through Microsoft, Google, or anybody else within their work environment.
Right. So does that mean you've seen more individuals using it in the workplace for their own productivity? Are you seeing entire teams implementing AI or entire organizations implementing AI?
Well, a lot of the types of use cases that they did share were things like document processing, meeting scheduling, report writing, things that can be a little bit more independent. If it's something that's a customized application, then obviously they are not going to customize it themselves. It might be something that at the very least the department leadership has to be involved in. But a lot of the preparation that goes into using any new technology seems to be, at this stage at least, a little bit more, again, decentralized. There are a lot of situations that were uncovered in this data, and this was from a survey of 2,000 state and local government workers, so a fairly broad representation across the U.S. Many of them were saying that they had received no training from their organization, and that if they had some preparation that went into implementing this AI application, whatever it might be, they did not feel that their employer was as prepared as they could be. It was more likely that they would be saying that their employer was less prepared than more prepared.
Interesting. So people feel that their organizations are a little bit slower on the uptake when it comes to AI rather than the individuals like, hey, let me just jump into this. Let me just jump into Chat GPT or whatever I'm going to use to help me finish up this report or things like that.
Right. And, I mentioned training. Yes, about 60% were saying that they hadn't received any training from their employers. A smaller percentage, maybe 20%, were saying that they'd at least had some discussions about key policy issues. So, cybersecurity being a big one, or the potential for hallucination in the data.
Mm.
But just because those discussions took place doesn't mean there was necessarily a formal policy. And one of the really interesting things as far as policy is concerned is one of our questions was whether AI usage was either regulated or prohibited by your government. And there were about 15 to 20% who said, I don't know.
Mm.
And that's a bit of a head scratcher. If you have a policy whatsoever, it should at least be clear to people that a policy exists, even if they don't know the details on what that policy is.
Well, speaking of which, we're talking about those concerns, policies. What are some of the most common concerns or the barriers to adoption that you've been seeing with AI? And on the flip side, what are some of the safeguards or the work to address some of those concerns?
I think what we'd seen in the data was, to start with, that those who had been using AI were seeing efficiency gains from it, particularly in some of those off-the-shelf commercial applications. Don't necessarily need the ramp up that a more customized application might. And it was much more common for them to see efficiency gains than issues with the implementation. But there were also some confidence issues that were shared. Employees generally were more likely to say that they were confident in their own use of AI compared to their coworkers' use of AI.
Mm.
But they weren't as confident when it came to making decisions based on AI results. And I think a lot of that goes back to maybe the horror stories we've heard about, the potential for hallucinations, where AI results might actually give you citations or footnotes for the sources that were used to come up with the results, but some of those themselves might not be true citations. So there definitely is a lot of awareness of that. Whether people are doing the work to review that or not is another matter, though, and that's something, aside from the training aspect, 28% said that the AI results were rarely or never reviewed. And I think of that from, let's say, a city council perspective. If I'm taking a report to the city council and the results of what is being recommended have rarely or never been reviewed by the city manager or the department head or what have you, that's concerning.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of videos, articles, all kinds of things on AI as I've gone into the content rabbit hole to learn more about it for myself. And,
Yeah.
people say, oh, does this mean that AI is bringing on the death of the expert? We don't need experts anymore. We can just ask ChatGPT and they will give us all the answers. But in my own usage and in looking into all of these things and the stories that other people are saying anecdotally, I actually think that the expert is more important now than ever because of this, because you do need that person who can review what the AI is giving you and who can know what the best practices are in implementing it, know what the best practices are in, even if it's something like copywriting or something like that.
Right.
The expert is going to know how to leverage that information that they're generating, or the brainstorming ideas that they're using for, or if they're putting reports and stuff. And they can also, I've experimented before where I put data into, my own data for side projects that I was working on into an AI, and then had it report back to me what I entered into it. And sometimes it spits out answers that were not in the report that I gave it. And I'm like, see, this is why we need experts. We need analysts still. So that's going to lead me to my next question is, do you see a concern of AI replacing local government jobs?
Well, it's not so much whether I see a concern. It's, in many ways, whether the employees themselves see a concern. And, if you only look at where the majority stands, the majority feel that no, it's not a concern. And that's encouraging. But looking at the need for significant retraining or the need for, possibly finding a new job because your job has been eliminated, 20% of the respondents said that they were very or extremely concerned about one or both of those. And, that's a sizable portion of your workforce that are potentially thinking, gee, they can't continue to do work as they have known it to this point. That impacts their morale, that impacts their likelihood of remaining with the organization. So hand in hand with that question of whether the employer is prepared for implementing AI or whether they have provided any training to the employees is whether the HR department or the IT department or administration is doing their due diligence to not only put policies in place that are clear and that they know people are, familiar with. It's one thing to pass it, but it's another thing to, give that training, that refresher training when necessary, but also that reassurance that, if it is not going to be impacting the employee significantly, that they understand that. And if it is going to be a more significant impact, that they understand likewise how that's going to play out. It may be that there are certain positions that had been staffed in the past that may not be staffed in the future, but that might be something that is done through attrition. It might be something that's gone through a significant time frame before it has that individual impact, or it might be something that, as you look at the organization's needs, they might simply evolve. And with AI, the kind of standard line that you hear is that it doesn't eliminate jobs, it frees you up to do higher value work. And that may be the case. One of the interesting stats that came out of our survey was that, even leaving aside the fact that these 20% of employees were feeling insecure about their own future with the organization, the majority felt like 3 years from now, when we look back at this, 3 years from now, they see their department having more staff than it does today. And only about, I think, 6% thinking that it would have less staff, which again is not speaking to saying, okay, just because I'm using this AI application, yes, it might make my task that I'm doing more efficient. That doesn't necessarily mean that my position will disappear or that somebody else's position might disappear. It might mean that I start doing other tasks more, maybe strategic tasks, maybe higher level tasks, or it might be that there are additional staff that are needed for other activities that hadn't even been considered before AI, potentially streamlined some of the other tasks that were being done.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Can you share an example of what type of a task or a role could be? We didn't have this before, but now that we have AI, here's a new type of role that we need and have available. What could that look like?
Well, I suppose the most direct would be looking at, the initial implementation of, computer workstations and internet-based services over the last 30, 40 years. You didn't need to have PC specialists. You didn't need to have network administrators. You didn't need to have web developers. But once you started to provide services in those ways, you added people who had those types of capabilities and other capabilities as well. Back before you had word processing software, people would type what they were working on, but then they learned the suite of office productivity tools and were able to grow within their positions as far as that was concerned. But, again, if you are freeing up time from tasks that tend to be time consuming, then you can work more on, again, the value added aspects. So if you're looking at something like writing a report, it might be that the background research is something that would be facilitated by AI. Just like somebody might turn to ICMA and look for case studies of how other cities have approached a similar issue, somebody might turn to an AI app and find some of those examples that they could cite. Again, they'll want to review those very carefully and make sure the results are reliable. But then beyond that, AI has limitations in that it tends to be trained on, large language models. And a lot of the large language databases that they are being sourced from are either public domain or they are, based on old information. They are likely not based on your particular government because, one, they've been focused on, I think, much more the commercial market than the government market. But two, there are so many governments of varying sizes around the country. The AI models are not going to be experts in your government. You are going to be expert in your government. You're going to be familiar more with the policy environment, with the local codes, and the considerations that would go into what you would want to put into that policy. So, again, it would free you up from some of that background work to work on the more customized side that, would be relevant to your government.
I feel like that should go on a t-shirt somewhere, honestly.
Good.
And here's the thing too, is you're talking a lot about new roles. We're talking about really the evolution of technology in this modern day and age. We're in an information age. We're in a technological boom when it comes to AI. and digital efficiency and all of these great things. So I think what we're looking at is a shift in what workforce readiness could look like and what it should look like. So when we're talking about how to be successful as we go through this transition and we start implementing and using AI, what kind of skill sets or trainings do you think that local governments need to be thinking about now in order to future-proof themselves even in today's environment?
Well, I think the starting point needs to be that, 50,000 foot level to talk about the concerns around AI, cybersecurity being number one, making sure that where you have, personally identifiable information from local residents or utility customers or whomever it might be, that is protected, number one. Number two, that if you are using AI to come up with recommendations or policies or what have you, that you have a process to ensure that it is not only a reliable result, but it's an unbiased result as well. And that you understand and can explain if there is an underlying algorithm, what that is. And, I think from let's say a scientific method example, you mentioned, putting together something that you knew what you expected the results to be. In a perfect world using an AI prompt, if you word it carefully, you should get the same result each time you run that. And if it's slightly different, maybe it's slightly different because, the AI system is drawing on more information than it had previously, but hopefully it's not giving you an entirely different result. But that's the type of information that you need to know if, for instance, you're looking at HR and, evaluating candidates for a job, or purchasing and making sure that you're selecting the right vendor. You don't want to be in a position where you're asked afterward what your methodology was, and you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, AI did it for me. It's entirely inscrutable.
Absolutely. It's not going to replace you in person, that's for sure, if you have an interview. And then there's a lot of local governments out there that want to implement AI. They want to be successful with it. They want to implement it throughout their organization, but they want to do it in a safe way and in an ethical way. What advice do you have after doing all of this research for local government leaders that are looking to move forward implementing AI in their organizations?
Well, I'd say, among the options are to start small or slowly. Maybe in a particular department, maybe one that does not have, databases of information that would be too sensitive to be exposed to the internet, or to firewall that off. And it is possible to do that so that, the queries that you're running are not accessing the information that you don't want it to have access to. And likewise, then provide the training to those staff so that, they know what they are doing, they know what they're not supposed to be doing, and they know how to appropriately review and attribute the results so that it's clear to everybody how that was sourced and, how those algorithms were both devised and reviewed.
So lots of communication, lots of training, making sure everyone's on the same page, getting your policy up to date, all of those types of things.
You mentioned the report that's on our website. There are two reports on our website right now, both pulling from the same data. And one of the findings from the second report was that, as you look at those who use AI on a routine basis in their work, there is also a correlation there to higher morale, which I think, anytime you look at a correlation like that, it's possible that higher morale people are more engaged in the organization, more informed. Maybe they are getting more professional development from their employers. Whatever the case is, if you've got that training, that employee engagement, that employee development going on, that can help to counteract, again, that concern that 20% of the employees have as far as, will my job still be here? Maybe they haven't heard anything about that, but they have concerns. And that communication, as you say, is key.
Well, that just goes to show that by addressing AI, moving forward with these types of these trainings, and what you're really doing is you're improving the workplace overall. You're increasing transparency, you're increasing opportunities for engagement with your staff. You are increasing the likelihood that people will want to stay. So staff retention can be impacted by the actions that you take to move forward with these types of things. So if you think about it holistically, it's not just about a tool that we can use as individuals or to help us, move through our work day. It's not just about the tool, but it's also about how does this impact the lives of regular employees, their retention.
And the local residents as well.
And the residents,
And
exactly.
something that, where they have indicated that, they've seen results from the AI usage, most of them are saying that the residents are satisfied with the way that those AI services are being rolled out. So, lots of positives from it, just a lot of, I'd say legwork in terms of communication and policy and planning.
I know a lot of people are afraid of AI, as any giant shift in technology has created that response, but it sounds like if we approach it the right way, it can really be a positive boon for our organizations and our residents, our communities as a whole. Is there anything that surprised you about those survey results?
I think the only thing that surprised me a little bit was how many thought that their departmental staffing would increase 3 years from now. And again, I think that, if anything, that is reflective of thinking that there will be new needs for staff that are uncovered by the fact that there are new capabilities that AI opens up.
I agree.
But
That's
again,
something I
that's
find
balanced
surprising
with
as
that.
well.
Yeah. But, again, balanced with that fear that some have. I think there are going to be a lot of changes in organizations and in the nature of the work that's being done. So, it may not be that, there's no change in the staffing levels, but I would expect that, that might differ from one department to another.
Mm. So it doesn't have to be the terminator of jobs. It can be an opportunity.
Well, certainly can. And, a lot of the use cases, when we look at the more customized side of AI, beyond just writing a report or researching something, where it's helping to predict maintenance needs before, a utility system might fail, or when it is best to be resurfacing a particular road and how to plan that, planning for, crime prevention, things like that really are force multipliers in the organization. And again, can be paired with the human understanding of what has been the history in that particular organization, that particular community, and be part of how they work with the specifics of the systems or the infrastructure or the community within which they're working.
100%, absolutely. And I love that use for it too. Those things that humans don't necessarily need to spend all of our time doing, the infinite task work that can be reduced, the burden on our time that can be reduced. And also another thing is data is infinite nowadays, and having
Right.
an AI to be able to process all of that for us and curate, maybe if it's just curating it from all over the place, all the sources of data into one area where we can digest that into a dashboard or something like that. Even those types of applications, maybe that's another idea for, hey, we now need an analyst because now we've got infinite data being curated in one place. Well, what does that mean for action in our local government? What does that mean for our decision making? What does that mean for the state of livability in our community? That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like more content like this, visit ICMA.org, and you can come to the ICMA Annual Conference in Tampa. It's October 25th through the 29th, and Gerald will be presenting on artificial intelligence and public employees, implementation, results, and concerns. Definitely you'll want to come and check out that session. And for more on MissionSquare Research Institute, you can visit research.missionsq.org, and we hope that this information and this conversation has been insightful for you all. All right, everybody, we'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Bye.